Wednesday, August 10th, 2005. I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline. Tonight, what the president thinks your children should be taught in school. There are those who say this can't be explained by simple evolution.
I think the designer is God.
And there are those who say evolution is the only scientific explanation.
It's cheating to say, oh, okay, this is really a tough one, so let's just quit and say God did it.
It is a religious belief disguised as science.
Tonight, Doubting Darwin, the marketing of intelligent design. A new chapter of an old debate over evolution, and President Bush has poured some gasoline on the fire. Talking to Texas newsmen at the White House the other day, the president referred to evolution and what's come to be known as intelligent design. And he said, both sides ought to be properly taught so people can understand what the debate is about. I think that part of education is to expose people to different schools of thought. Well, yes, but not all schools of thought deserve the same level of attention. Using the U.S. News and World Report Masters Program List, my colleague Chris Bury wrote to the chairs of the top 10 university biology departments in the country. What he asked and how they responded in a moment. This, however, may turn out to be less a scientific and more of a political debate. Here's Chris Bury.
In downtown Seattle stands an office building that houses a think tank known as the Discovery Institute. One of its central missions is revolutionary, to convince Americans and opinion leaders from the president to the Pope that modern science is so wrong about evolution that schools should also consider an alternative that its advocates call intelligent design.
When we find information embedded in DNA in living cells, we think that we are looking at strong evidence for a prior intelligent source. And so the theory of intelligent design is the idea that that appearance of design, that nanotechnology or that information that's embedded in the living organism is not just an appearance, it's not illusory as the Darwinists assert, but instead it's evidence of real design, actual design.
On the surface, this appears to be a new debate about evolution, now joined by the president. But critics call it a sophisticated attempt by the Discovery Institute to stir the embers of an argument settled in the 19th century.
What they're really after is to bring the supernatural back into science itself so that the authority of science in the classroom stands behind this claim that evidence of an intelligent designer has been discovered through scientific means.
So how did this idea called intelligent design itself evolve to the point where the president came to say that, quote, both sides should be taught? In large part, it has to do with a skillful marketing campaign that has promoted the notion of a controversy that many scientists say simply does not exist. In our own survey of 10 top biology departments at leading universities, the verdict was unanimous. All 10 department chairs insisted that no scientific evidence supports the concept of intelligent design. But in newspaper opinion articles and books and high-gloss video productions like this, the Discovery Institute has suggested that scientists are engaged in a raging debate.
150 years ago, Charles Darwin transformed science with his theory of natural selection. Today, that theory faces a formidable challenge. Intelligent design has sparked both discovery and intense debate over the origin of life on Earth.
They've really, in many ways, won the public relations battle with a brilliant slogan, which is, teach the controversy, because it implies that there is a controversy, when in fact, in science, in the scientific literature, there's no controversy. But by saying that, they have managed to convince the public that somehow it's a debate between two ideas that are virtually equals, where in fact they're not.
And the kind of thing we construct is dependent on where we come from.
The intelligent design strategy dates back to a 1987 Supreme Court decision that banned the teaching of creationism in public schools because it violated the separation of church and state.
Well, the only evidence that I know of that supports creationism is the Bible.
In the wake of that ruling, the think tank published an ambitious manifesto called the Wedge Document. It stated governing goals to defeat scientific materialism and replace it with the understanding that nature and human beings are created by God.
I think the designer is God. But look, it sounds like you're trying to make a scandal of where the evidence might lead. And we think that the evidence leads first to intelligence, and then from there, there is a second question, which is the identity of the designer.
The terminology it sounds updated, but even the term intelligent design is not new. It's a Trojan horse in the sense that what students would really get in a classroom if this were taught is not at all science. It's something else. It is a religious belief disguised as science.
Mr. Santorum.
4 years ago, the intelligent design movement got its first big political boost. Senator Rick Santorum, the Pennsylvania Republican, pushed for language in federal law, asking public schools to include criticism of evolution in science classes.
Where biological evolution is taught, the curriculum should help students to understand why this subject generates so much continuing controversy.
That language never made it into the law. But by then, the Discovery Institute was actively encouraging local school districts to turn a critical eye on evolution.
Organisms look designed because, in fact, they were designed.
In 2002, the Discovery Institute helped persuade Ohio to change its curriculum so teachers could present criticisms of evolution in science classes.
The evidence we see points to design. Where we go beyond that is a theological question. Well, I'm also
in May, Discovery officials showed up in Kansas, where they also convinced the state school board to do the same thing. Now, some local officials are pushing beyond the Discovery Institute strategy. In Dover, Pennsylvania, the school board has been sued for violating the separation of church and state after introducing this textbook teaching intelligent design.
I think it's biblical. You know, God created the heavens and the earth. If you believe the Bible, then that's pretty obvious.
The Discovery Institute argues that the complexities of human cells cannot be explained by evolution alone. Yet without evidence of an intelligent designer, call it God, the devil, or supernatural phenomena, a scientific community that demands rigorous research and review sees the argument as an attack on science itself.
For 200 years, there has been a consensus among the practitioners of science that doing science meant explaining the phenomena naturalistically. And a scientist would go as far as he or she could along those lines. And if you couldn't do it, if something was too complex to explain, that constituted a scientific puzzle, a challenge for your successors down the road to solve. And it's cheating to say, oh, okay, this is really a tough one, so let's just quit and say God did it.
Convincing local school boards, of course, is often easier than persuading skeptical scientists.
I don't know a whole lot about this subject.
How do they appeal to the American sense of fairness, fair play?
By presenting a specious argument that both sides of this controversy should be heard, that it's only fair to teach children both sides of the controversy about evolution. The problem is that there aren't two sides in this debate. There is the science that supports evolutionary theory, period.
The president's own science advisor has said all along that intelligent design is not science. But now that Mr. Bush has endorsed the idea that both sides should be taught, supporters of intelligent design believe they have won a great symbolic victory. After all, the president himself has now given their cause the kind of respect that most of the scientific community clearly has not. This is Chris Bury for Nightline in Washington.